Oh, tashdile Rinpoche.
Tashdile Tsangma. Everybody tashdile. Gotsuk nang shanang tisare.
Oh, laso.
Chapsin dubati duyana kasina shichibache.
Sangye chodang de re dige rewe la.
Odi tisare, tis tuzi maa yungsarwa. Odi tisare.
Laso.
Sanje chodan di tsa. Odi ngaranzu tsa chikdiyo, kuranzu tsa chikdiyo chumna tisare. Dine sashibishi di duyo shanang tisare. Mende dubati she.
Laso. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the precious teaching again today with us. And I'm going to do the opening prayer. Sangye chodang sogen cholang la ni gyab sun shi da gen jin so ge be so nan shi do lan pen shi sang ge du bar sho. So our translator is still not here yet, so I'm going to do one time in English.
Yeah, I can do it, Anila.
Oh, you're there? Oh, okay, sure.
In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings.
Ma nam ka dang yam be sem jen tham jen de wan dang de ve gyu dang dan bar gyu je dung al dang dung ai gir gyu dang dal war gyu je Zungal me ber dewa dang min dal war gyur jek Nyering chal dang is dang dal wen dang yom la ne bar gyur jek.
May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness in the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion.
Okay. Sajin Bujun Junshin Mendong Tam Ri Ram Ling Jing Il Dai Gin Ban Di Sangye Jing Lash Mix Dem Pul Wa Yin Dogur Nam Da Jing Do Shod Baran Sho Om Guru Dewa Dagini Mandalam Pradin Soha.
The ground is sprinkled with scented water and strewn with flowers. It is adorned with Meru, the supreme mountain, the four continents, and the sun and moon. As a Buddha field, I offer it. May all sentient beings attain the happiness of the Buddha fields. Om Guru Dewa Dakini Ratna Mandala Pratitsa Soha.
Simjin Namgyu Sambandang Loyen Chechang Jilda War Chechun Tun Moen Tek Bayen Chegin Korlos Kordo Sol.
Please turn the wheel of the Dharma of the two vehicles and their combination according to the dispositions and likewise the mental capacities of sentient beings.
Jide dendron ze ba gang kanda yan dan dembe tono namba kunde naso de somba ninde chenjo zimbe soje sanje jine yumde la cha ze manam kanda nyambe simje tham ji je dendo toja la nam yan da ban zo sange je bombar bo chinyuro nyuro jine je tobru cha de chendo gese la ne gerim ban se nyambe tuje da je sembara shu ose o ta kasi Karesana, as Chanjuji sim Jevin Juche, in subject of Chevaina, cousin Chanjuji sim Jevin Ju, in Chanjuji sim Mui Sheva, in Chanju sim Jelabja, subject some Yubin, and Chanjuji sim Jevin Judin, she is Simba. Ta Chanjuji sim Mui de la Kunzo sim Jeda, Tenda sim Jessini, or then. Telen kunzu simche telan ya, ene dashin jiwa gomba, ene jida, ene jenye lamba chirwa sabji ni yuebe nane, ene dashin jiwa, o teve, or subject in a mashu. Yes.
So in the 37 Bodhisattva practices, there are 3 sections we mentioned. The first one is the section on the cause of arousing bodhicitta. The second is a section on the actual bodhicitta. And then the third one is a section on the precepts, the training of bodhicitta. And we already completed the first section, which is the cause of arousing bodhicitta. And we are now in the second section on the actual cultivation of bodhicitta, which consists of 2, the relative and the ultimate. And then the relative bodhicitta consists of exchanging self with others and taking negative circumstances as the path. And so of these 2, we are now the first one, exchanging oneself with others.
What is it? Dunga Malin that they choose the cousin Rosway. Rosway.
Patrick Rose, Samsung. Rosway. Rosway.
The cousin Rose or something. Dunga Malin that they choose. Doga Sanji Shembesim, the Chung said the other cousin shoes and or Dashin Java, the shoes in the Rova, Tenema, the Ne Terry, the one Niba, Kenya Lam the Chill was at the Nema. What the Nema shoe, sorry, Tari. Because shoes in my sorry. Tadinema, or Kenya Lam the Chill was at the Nema shoe in Rova. Kenya Lam the Chill was Telaya, and then subject of Chevaina, or subject to Tampado. And the Chuginani Tambo Tela, and then near Cholam Cheres in the subject Chuginani Tambo, near Cholam Cheres. And the Suda, the Chen Wangi Bagin Nor, Tamje Chogam Choto Junaya, Luda Launch, Jesum Javanam, Telango, Gesela, Sumre. And the Karasungo is not dead and that day. And the Jugosundra Shigerua, and then Debe Wangi. O tene rangi juno lonje o tsupu chene choba yene ya re jambi wangi choba yene ya re o so ge juno long so ge juno lonje choba ham shin chok to juna ya ne lu da ge lu da lonje ne thusum do sa be yewa nam ne jibu tela ya ngo che re de gese chanju sem ban nam ji ya do chene nyamso le ma re so me ya tela ngo gese la ne yin so.
So we actually already talked about exchanging self with others. So now we continue with taking adverse or negative conditions as the path. And that consists of 10 subsections. And the first one is to take like robbery or theft as the path. And that's verse number 12. Even if others influenced by great desire steal all one's wealth or have it stolen, dedicating to them one's body, possessions, and virtues accumulated in the 3 times is the Bodhisattva's practice. So even if someone driven by desire takes your wealth either in a forceful way or in a hidden way, whatever is taken from one, it is the practice of the Bodhisattvas to then dedicate their body and the virtues accumulated in the 3 times to them. Yes.
Ne da sabje niba de davo lam cheres ne de wa sabje niba de dala niba chuse meshin dos kanda da gi go che chena ninji wangi di ba nam dala lem gese la ne yin so re ene dala niba so so la niba chune mene ya niba chunju ji mene ya ani shembe ge de ne rangi go che ba am dala ne bar chene ya ene tela ba shedam ma ge ba che ene ninji wangi ene Desabe tene dibanam tene dala so lemba sharwa gese chanju samba namje dosene tene lo jongo yorwa te sonza tene dala lemba gese lali sonja da te to lo jongo re sonja ta tandango
And then
so
the
ngaran
second, I'm sorry.
tandango
Okay.
so ta tandang ngaran so te ta bogi soba gom thugu re besena da soba gom thugu mare ro ba shengi go che ga jona tene pe ma te kale ka pore go che da phasha 칭해지 라와 이네야 서고 말이 이네야 다 단단 말한 좀 매버지는 공고래. 왜나 소소기 저기 소소기 주초반다고. 내 소소기 마가사 사자 소소 마가사게 간사게 소소기 주초밤. 내 소소 마가사 미기 소소라더니 내버셔ban 고 제발라고 제발로서 근데 매버지는 공고래 당보. 당보 매버지는 로든 공고고요라 곰곰곰 되네 두 채와이나 인 간사진에 되니 시행기 우원소 소소라지 슈바이네 테텔라 서바 곰투야지 용거래 마또 당번이 지 셴바게 소지 슈용나 지 바서바 곰거래선 어디 갈래 가고래 말아서 가르스나 단다 가르스나 책과 토마 매반네 되네 저 세상에 왕도 송대요 봐 인도 삼발함사 고카도 곰토야 갈래 가고래데 이네야 단단 알아서 매바치는 곰거다 도스체네
So then the second is taking enemies as the path. That's verse number 13. Even if others try to cut off one's head when one is utterly blameless, taking upon oneself all their negative deeds by the power of compassion is the Bodhisattva's practice. So even if one has not done anything, the slightest thing wrong, if someone were to come and cut off your head or harm you in any other way, you should not get angry. So this is how the Bodhisattvas would practice. They would not get angry, but rather they would take on these negative deeds of this other person with great compassion. And this is how the Bodhisattvas train their mind. And of course, if you think about it, if someone harms us in such a way, like if somebody wants to cut off our head, it's really difficult to practice patience. Obviously, normally we are not able to practice patience with that. It's not even necessary for a head to be cut off, even if other people do something much more minor to us. For example, they insult us or give us a bad reputation and so on. Even then, we are unable to practice patience. But it's something that we need to train the mind in. We have an aspiration towards being patient first. So when somebody comes and insults us or steals our wealth or harms us in any way, cuts our head or limbs, then first of all, we need to cultivate an aspiration toward patience. And then we habituate to that aspiration over and over again, so that at some point when we're actually in the face of harm, that we are able to practice patience. But it's very difficult to be completely patient with such a situation right from the start, because since beginningless time in samsara, we have habituated to getting angry. And so that is why it's very difficult to just like that instantly cultivate patience with something like that. So what we need to practice now is to cultivate an aspiration towards this ability of practicing patience.
뭐다 되네마저 지딘 최계에 대해서 거였어요. 그래서는 뭐 되네 니에바스도 좀 안절라지 주노론지 중나 말한 좀 가거려. 지딘 최계에는 직대로 지딘 첨반이다 많이 잡았어. 말한 좀 니에바 주노론지 중나 가와. 주노론지 마슈나 마가와. 네 떠라다는 가와. 봐. 네 떠라 마다나 마가와. 네 뭐 신기 측년바 마나 되는 마가와. 측년부 마나 되는 가와. 네 소소베 잡아 전부 되네 중나산나 잡아 전부 중나 가와. 네 잡아 마중나 마가와. 다 나란서 진대 연구요. 와 지딘 최게스미디. 와 대승구여서 되네 마. 인데 선만다 삽제니바디 슈 심바체. 삽제 숨바디 다 미니바 람체레스니 미니바 암체레스니 삽제 숨바디 송고여서 가시 달라 미니나서 봐 동송 잡으러 줘버려 지나야 chambe simje lanya tenyeji yenden jumba jese lane yin songre ene jubu gang shige tene sosola ene tsik minyemba tsik dukja ene namjola koyong tene semba makiba chandro tsik minyemba o tende tongsun chabara ben rona ya ene tela pa magawa machene tene te pa simje manya kansa khara dewa dan denro chena sam ningje samne ane chambe simje ku ne lane tene 거기 균 맞아 가지 미디기 연된 지역으로 송래 링원주 계세 전주 선반 남지야 도스 냠선 렘바레 송래 알아서 배야 냠선 렘바레 송고 아주 강가 매버 제 공부니라 알아서 레 담보 봐 매버 제 미기 소소라 지금 미년바 마바다 된대신 얘네 뭐 된다 마바 곰니 도스 매곰 치고 디 된다 독도 저거디 죽으러 공부 시단 등이 제일 마지 제지 중나 마지 슈기 예서와 단다 마조라고 직제라고 지금 그거 예서 한 뜻이라는 거 봐.
So here we are mainly these verses are speaking about the 8 worldly concerns. So for example, if we acquire wealth, then we are happy, we like that. And if we do not find what we're looking for, then we are unhappy about that. Or if we are praised, we are happy. But if we are blamed, we are unhappy. If somebody says something nice to us, we like that. If somebody insults us, we don't like that. We like to be famous, to have a good reputation, and we do not like to have a bad reputation. So these verses here are speaking of the 8 worldly concerns. And so of our different headings, we already completed the second. So now the third one is to take insult, offense as the path. That's verse number 14. Even if someone broadcasts throughout the billion worlds all sorts of offensive remarks about one, speaking in turn of that person's qualities with a loving mind is the Bodhisattva's practice. So even if someone says things, insults, offensive things to one, things that make you unhappy, and proclaims them throughout the billion worlds, a Bodhisattva trains their mind in compassion and wishes for their happiness, and instead of pointing out their faults, they only speak about their qualities. So this is how the Bodhisattvas have practiced, and this is how we should practice too. But so as beginning practitioners, again, all of these verses is something that we need to first have an aspiration towards. So when somebody insults us, then we should cultivate an aspiration towards being able to not get angry and practice in the way the Bodhisattvas practiced. So later, if there is some time, I will also go into how to practice with anger or hatred. But we see if we have time. But for now, we go verse by verse.
Subject Shivadi, singing Lamcheris said, thinking about Magarwa de Lamcher, singing Lamcheris, Roman Devi, Uzu Gashigi, Sani Trushi, singing Manaya, Della Gave, Shiji, Dishiji, Quiver de Gesela, yes. Then Garanzo Mimambo Gila, and it did Samala, then Mitsuki Sosogi, or Tangni Trini, Soso Tangni Trees, and Sosogi. Journey, one, then Tignyamba market to Naya, in the Telapa Shedama Chevache, in the Tenda with Jibuti, Rangi Givishi, the Shisha. Yes, a Karasana, then a Sobago make it in it, or can Givishini, something in it, Tela Givishi, the Shishani, Telapa, in it, or Machavachin, Tela Kubacha, yes, or then guess it's just abundance. Tela, yes, only.
So then next is number 4, and that is to take negative words as the path, and that's verse number 15. Even if in the midst of a public gathering, someone exposes faults and speaks ill of one, humbly paying homage to and perceiving that person as a spiritual friend is the Bodhisattva's practice. So even if someone exposes one's fault in the midst of a crowd of people, it is a Bodhisattva's practice to not get angry at them, but instead regard them as a spiritual teacher with a mind of patience and respect. So this is how the Bodhisattvas have practiced.
Ne soso ke pugu na shinde ne tingi chang shanjo mi digi ne soso la ben dra na shimbe marungba cheba ine yang sokore. Ne kharre se na ama jela pushi ye na pudi naba ina tene ama deke pudi la be sewa chambo yongoro wa ni pudi ne dele chana sa ni pudi chi marung samne sewa chambo yongba na shin tene teta bo ke dra de la tene takor tene sewa chebore songre. Kharre se na tsekowa thoma mebane rangi ma che nyongre. Chingi 장바 샤다 레드니 마이 폴라 제와 장바 나신 되네 되네 데비 칸사 텔라드니 제와 거니 장구레 손데 게세 천제 선반는 자 발레레 손.
And then number 16, even if someone for whom one has cared as lovingly as one's own child regards one as an enemy, to cherish that person as dearly as a mother does an ailing child is the Bodhisattva's practice. So, for example, a mother who has a child loves her child very much, and then no matter how troublesome that child is, the mother will look after the child and treat the child with even greater love. And so similarly, we should regard all beings as our parents. So someone who regards us as an, even though we cared for them, regards us as an enemy, has also been our mother in a previous life, and therefore a Bodhisattva looks after them with great love.
ngage wangi nyatap chena yang lama shindo kube daniji joro lemba gese lane yin so ene range yende randa yende nyamba randa tene jutok nyamba yana rale yende o memba rale jutok memba wa hetabu jibu kansa ke tene ngage ge wangi soso lape nyapchu tang do ne so nyatap chena ya 강사 대라 되네 라마 신도 되네 그게 그거 제거래 송지다 그거 되네 그게 군네 되네 대라 예 제외 장그래 송지라 쪼르는 밖에서 라니 송지.
And so the next sixth is to take contempt as their path. That's verse number 17. Even if influenced by pride, an equal or inferior person treats one with contempt, respectfully placing that person like a guru at the crown of one's head is the Bodhisattva's practice. So even if someone who is an equal or inferior, if they if they treat one with a prideful mind, if they treat one with disdain, disrespectfully with a prideful mind, then one should regard them as a guru with great respect and regard them with a mind of great love. So this is how the Bodhisattvas have practiced.
롱체 소에 봉시 되네 대뒤다 또 미기 소소가 되네 nhập 제바 야나 삽첨부 내지 따바면은 되게 뇌박이 소소라 뇌니고 동네 양바 있네 이 막이바 용바 있네야 텔라파 라 되네 되네 아 잡제 내다 된지 답잖아 Drogon Dictu, Dala Legislation, Samatine, Soso Labe, Toagi Pomba, what Toya Pond and Dunganyam, do that to make in Yachi. Che, Taganashi Soso Labe, Nenaza, doing in Nova Chumba in Yarava, then 내 탐지 로고 심진 로고스나 되는 심진 감각이 이니 동해다가 나사 감각 되니 소소라서 달라 렘바데 달라 랭게 인삼네 셈 shum바메바 되니 이체거래 소리 근데 shum바메바 제고바데 예세 전주 선반는 제라네레 소리
So then next is to take like impoverishment or discouragement onto the path. Verse number 18. Though one may have an impoverished life, always be disparaged by others, afflicted by dangerous illness and evil spirits, to be without discouragement and to take upon oneself all the misdeeds and suffering of beings is the Bodhisattva's practice. Even if one experiences greater poverty, is looked down upon by others and is afflicted by sickness or evil spirits, and whatever suffering one encounters, one should take it upon oneself. One takes upon oneself the misdeeds and the suffering of all those beings without discouragement. And so this is how the Bodhisattvas have practiced.
단 subject 개바 조라람 체르스게 되는도 님바라 자신 로마주 남대 부이 논다 톱주자 시베 벤지 님보 메시니 경바명 보게세 나네 소리 내 땀년자베 첨부자 되는베 미망보게 소소라베 야 떠라당 미망보게 소소라 그거지니 베 남대 개부 첨부 남대 세계 본다보게 되는 소소라 너로 여바 이네냐 이네 시베 벤저로 롱절라 님보 가야요 말이에 소리 너 뭐때 대인데 삼아 소소라 땀년자 가나시 준노롱지 첨부 요선데 캠뱅하게 제주요 말이에 소리 언니 대개서 전체 선반남자야 도시는 냠스 렘바레 도스니 마란소게 제수 중니 냠스 렘바레 소리
Then next is number 8, and that is to take wealth as the path. That's verse number 19. And though one may be famous and revered by many people or gain wealth like that of Vaishravana, having realized that worldly fortune is without essence, to be unconceited is the Bodhisattva's practice. So even if one experiences fame and is praised and respected by many and is wealthy like the wealth God himself, one should recognize that such wealth, worldly wealth, has no essence and not become prideful. That this is how the Bodhisattvas have practiced, and this is how we should practice as well.
subject goba shedang lam chereres rangi shedang dawo matuluna chiren dawo dujan pewa njurs desir chanda ninje mapon kis ranjun durwa kis nani so wata de tanda khare songo rena soso jula yobe shedang di dawo ngoma de tere so chigi khasa di soso gen dawo ngoma mare so yo denen dawo ngoma di soso jula yobe shedang di re so de 체럽네 체럽 라 풍벌치 그래 송으로 샤단되게 경기전 아니 대 송사되니 치를 자고 가지 뛰바 이내야 직세바 이내 니용거리 니세나 조용 조세나 자용거리로 되네 라고 가지 뛰바 이내야 되네 야 폐용거리 송으로 점진 대 송사되니 장단 인지기 되네 되네 마봉스나 다 마미다고 장단 인지 되기 되네 소소기 줄여요 샤단디 자우 셰단 소소 줄어요빈 자우 셰단데 되는 뛰고래 소리 뛰고바데 되네게서 전주 선반남지야 도스 냠스 렘바래 소리 되네 아란소게 도스 냠스 렘바래 소리
So then number 9 is to take anger as the path, and that's verse number 20. If outer foes are destroyed while not subduing the enemy of one's own hatred, enemies will only increase. Therefore, subduing one's own mind with the army of loving compassion is the Bodhisattva's practice. So this verse is saying that our true enemy is the anger in our own mind. It is not an outer person, an outer enemy. So if we try to tame our outer enemies, it will only be to our own detriment from lifetime to lifetime. The more we try to subdue our enemies, the more they will increase. If we defeat one, a second one arises. If we defeat two, then 10 arise. If we defeat 10, 100 arise. So they will only increase. So instead, the way the Bodhisattvas practices, they defeated the enemy of hatred with the army of love and compassion. And so we should practice in a similar way.
다 subject 주바 대샤 남치를 되다. 대외 연대 lenze 추단자 지점 제제 세바 페로주 강라 현자 제비 오보는 텔라본 게셀라레 예송데 네 대외게 연대 주노 논조라서 바로와 담년자라서 네 대다 네 lenze 추단자버려서 당아랑서 추차고지 여러와 추차고지 동바이나 코카 보면 세게 말와 카고면 세라 추차고면 저지 동고고요 추지로와 그러면 추차고대 동바이나 카망망망 꼼줘야 마도 데 카고면 꼼비 동에 세게 말레스 가즈 그 추차고 베라롱 제와 이네야 꼼기 동에 세게 말레스 배 대나시 얘네 대베인데 강나 되네 현자 제비 뭐부 된소 얘네 대라 된소 얘네 체도 빵고래서 데 뭐부 된소 같이 여가 있네야 되나 알아서 현자 제기 주노론제 되네 치 주노론제 로와 되네 담년자 나서가 된소 같이 중바 있네야 되네 되게 알아서 대화 연구 말해서 되네 직중은 니 용으로 전화서 니 중은 송중으로 전화서 되게 동네 중요한 말도 제라 되네 동네 줄을 채워 지금 말해서 우리 중재 대선자 대다라 신자방 그래 소리 되게서 전주 선반는지야 얘네 라레제 말한소야 대인지수 중에 선자 말한소야 되네 대 냠소에 모래서 그래.
Then number 10 is to take attachment as the path. That's verse number 21. Indulging sense pleasures is like drinking salt water. However much one indulges, thirst and craving only increase. Immediately abandoning whatever things give rise to clinging and attachment is the Bodhisattva's practice. So as these sense pleasures, it could be anything like actual objects of the senses or the experience of fame and so forth, and reputation. All of these pleasures are like drinking salt water. There is no way to quench one's thirst by drinking salt water. The more salt water one drinks, the more thirsty one will become. And so for this reason, because sense objects, sense pleasures are just like drinking salt water, indulging in them is like drinking salt water, one must abandon clinging attachment to the sense pleasures, because the more one enjoys them, and then the more one's desire for them becomes. So if one has one, then one wants two. If one has two, one wants three. One is never really content, no matter how much one has. And so therefore such indulgence will not separate one from suffering. And therefore it is the practice of the Bodhisattvas to abandon clinging attachment. And so similarly, we should follow their example.
대송도 참만은 나랑서 공부된데 시에토나야 호여서 요즘 가르서나 나랑서지 전노롱제 저부지 정바이나 되네 될라베 차과 시우지 게임거와 나라 전노롱제지 중로신나 삼통보 내지 전노롱제지 좋은데 되네 베 될라 차과 게임거와 다 될라 차과 망보 게임거도나 다 되게 괜다고 그러와 앞에는 전노롱제 망보 제 정바이나 되네 될라가 셈차 아니 디원게 진데는 나 최최야지 레그 말이 최최야게 계속진 로그래 삼로와 얘는 도시 공부 시행고로 당부 도시 공부 시 아니 녀바세 근데 소소로 준노론제 매바이네한테는 양아 준노론제 민도 산에 셈 shum고고요 내가 양 공부 가르치고 그래서 나 준노론제 매바디 나 최최야게 튕진 최최야게 in some Harisana, Juno Longe Mevaina, in a church, the Ma Yungu. Then around the Juno Longe Chesona, in a dig be Chashin Jacher, Chashin Jacher Lona, in a midi, in a be Man chair, in a chick, Juno Longe de Yoba Sumia, Sumba de Yantenea, Mando Soyagi, that in the Chigana Tizun Rugur, one Haranzo. Tea in this Hamala Tene, Junology Mevaina, Magic Church here, like Jack Nunga, something Aranzo, Junology Meva de never tell anything Aranzo Gawagum. Junology Yoba in a didn't tell a young Gomba Harishi was in Chashima Gavasha, Junology Yoba de Tenea, Punjola Tenga Marangi, Sonamsa, Tene Lama Tuji, Lama Punjo Sumji, Tujikatina, Junology, the Chore, some Rova. Teneni ya kunjo la choba ma ubon la jimbatan o juno longje dengi pamya longje chi ma che a samne tene do sene tene ngaranzo bomba she bores te juno longje meba ine ya tene ngaranzo sempa shumro ta nga juno longje mendo male jo mendo samne tene bomba she ji yo ma jun tinde semma shumro go dona juno longje meba de nga ya bo yin sam jungzen khare san juno longje mang so no ngala chue che ge tse ra go mendo samro 대성사 되는 준호론제 매바디 맞추어야게 도래 노섬 도세는 가는서 되네 니에바 카둘라 되는 가는서 도세 공부도시 시에버려서 단 준호론제 여바이나 대응원의 삼로 당다 제기요라와 준호론제 매바이나 대응원의 삼로 당다 지도다 저 가는서 심라 디지 용 마용세 된 가는서 삼로 당당게 제발에 마도제라 준호론제 여바디게 동에 대화에 차바지다 준호론제 매바되게 동해에 잡아지 요 말이야. 와 된대서 때나 저서 melata고 그런 근데 준호론제 가 고제 요 말인데 잠벌링을 권한에 셈바 끼바 매송으로 와 잠벌링 되는 거 끼바지 요 말에 송으로 와 됐 근데 송벨로 줘요다 저 안전 공부 시간대다 도시 시에토나 야고 요려서 니바 가도라 공부 도시 시에토나 야고 요려서
So, so we're speaking of the 8 worldly concerns, and so if we can really reflect on them, it would be really excellent. So, for example, if we possess wealth and possessions, normally we become attached to our worldly possessions. So instead of becoming attached, we should see the faults in having such many possessions. Because the fault of having many possessions is that when we have many possessions, our mind becomes attached, and then we don't have time to practice the Dharma. So if we do not have many possessions, you should not lose courage and think that, oh, I don't have anything, I'm so poor. But actually, you should regard that as a great favorable condition for Dharma practice. Because if we do not have a lot of things, then we also have more time to engage in Dharma practice. If we have too many things, then we are attached to those things, and we have to spend a lot of time on those things. We need a lot of time to create these things, to obtain these things, to protect our things, to increase our possessions. A lot of time is spent on that. If we do not have many things, then actually we also have less obstruction, less obstacle to our Dharma practice. And so therefore we should rejoice if we do not have a lot of things. If we do have a lot of things, we should not become attached to these things, but think that I have obtained these things as a result of merit accumulated in previous lives, and also through the kindness of the 3 jewels. So it is through the kindness of the Lama and the 3 jewels that I have found this wealth, and now I should offer it to the 3 jewels, or be generous to the poor, but not just let it be not become meaningless, a meaningless possession. And so on the other hand, if we do not have a lot of things, we should not lose courage and think that I'm so poor, I have nothing, and so on. But actually regard it as a good thing and think that now that I don't have a lot of things, I have more time to practice the Dharma. So it's good not to have so many things. And so there is a way of thinking about both of these. If you have a lot of things, there is a way of thinking about that. And if you do not have a lot of things, there's a different way of thinking about that. About either way, you should find that there is no one in the world more happy than me. So whether you have things or you do not have things. So in this way, we decrease our anger, our resentment, the negativity from our minds.
그냥 알아주지 미기지 계속 상승해서 때로 땅 용도 참아나 내가 대라양 공부 시행고 또 때로 땅도 공부 시행단 지요래 야메라 땅 용도 알아서 삼모당다 냐내 시행단 지요래 근데 미기 계속 상승해서 저 윤대 양보를 저배 개발을 저 좀보를 와저 상보에서 미 때로 땅 용도나 얘네 대한테는 공부 시행이야 근데 제냐만은 소랑기 얘네 시행 심지를 메라마다 근데 떠바체니 뒤 넘버 미빈제부디 세텔라야더니 생기 가서 생기 되는 소소라지 떠바디 요 된대신이 중발해서 공부시 근데 다가나시지 생기지 계속 상승 떠라다 용건도네 대답하게 된데 소소런데 민데 소소 다시체와 아니 민도나 소소소소 카출로네로와 오 카파몰로시 카소소 오란줄로 수 카타네데네 개박에 된데 창대로와 얘네 준비에 된데 창대 얘는 상복이 연된데서 상대면데 얘는 소소라 딱제체 아니 대창 면도나 얘는 대창 면도나 아 미기 뜨바나시 말아 연된데 면도 아니 미기 뜨바나시 중에 계주 상송 좀데 얘는 계주 상송 되냐기 가서 지우지 제선데 얘는 상바된데 깨고요 와 다가나시 되는 시행기랑 하지 메라다 연구도네 어데네 메라 칭년바마 메라 다용거든 텔라마가와 제야요 와 얘네 가르에서는 신기랑 준조바나 신균조 용거도나 얘네 소소 준조바 신기 준조바데 소소라 준데 민데 소소게 카츠로네 방법 다제죠 그래서 남산 가사들라 초마지지 뭐냐는 소소라 칸낭 낭도 따니 얘네 소소라 준데 민데 얘네 준디 민도나 신기 준조발라 마가와 제 좀생 가려서 그래서 거랑서 준조 세벨로는데 계신 게 봐요. 와 대인데 삼아되네 카츠올로네 되는 공부시에 버려. 되네 신기 준조발나 소소라 민도나 되네 가사들랑 가르치는 마가와 제버려. 가사들랑 가르치는 초와 제버려 섬 공부시. 되네 신기 소소라 준조발나 소소라 준디 도나 야 다된 계획 신이래 가르서나 말라 께 여바디 거기 뭐 준저버는 된 덴바레스 단디 준딩이 주주당이 야 준디 매버지 야버지 서서는 되는 도시네 공부시에버려 되는 다가나시 되는 신기 천년바마 준저 요거는 대한테는 천년만 넘서 되는 랑기 신기를 신라 되는 준저바로 천년바마 대 넘버 민비지부 세델라 민바레 삼로와 와디 세델라 넘버 민비지부 세델라 민바레 삼 가와곰 아니 신심진기야 되는 천년바 다된데 고변 동에 대단 탐대전이 되게 다 봐쇼 삼 도시형 공부 시해봐이나 아니 알아서 지 셈발라 지 다다 진로토로 밸런스 잡거든 셈바 어디서 기본 잡아 용거 대면마제는 신기 준 저거도 삼되네 델라바 초 델라바지 칭칭이 만되나 이 셈라 시디스니 유아요마 와 근데 또 세는 알아서 냠내 제고 아무서 단다 신기 빼나 직년바 마용도 참말라 알아서 람산 세바 검토고 말해 가르서나 알아서 단달래 담보바 인도 참말라 얘네 알아서 매바치는 검고 소소 마가서 미디수 치라 여바 검 얘네 되게 소소라 배 메라당조 직년바 마바 근데 검고 얘네 근데 검니 근데 진지 공도 쉬어봤나시 근데 좀 전도 삼로 땅 다가나시 되는 소소기 가사 미디야 소소 치라 메바진 곰 근데 되게 소소라 떠라당 저 개발을 저 좀보를 저 좀바를 저 상보를서 떠라당 근데 곰고 떠라당 곰 근데 되게 곰반나시 되는 되네 소소라 상보기 연대 창되면데 개별 연대 창되면데로 준비 연대 창되면데 되네 도시 담보 메바진 도시 곰 아니 공기 걸로데라 공지 땡기 줘도 아니 간장지네 되는 미신바 소소 마가사기 모소 소소라 되네 칭연바 마용도 사마라 아니 단다 서방 고매든도 되네 도시네 아니 도그레스 때 담보 매바치는 검도나 내 야고요레스
So, of the 8 worldly concerns, then there's the praise, and we like to be praised, and we don't like to be blamed. For example, when someone comes and tells us that you are a great scholar and you are so virtuous and you're so good, then we generally like that. But if somebody blames us, and we dislike that. So instead, we should think that how we should practice is that when somebody comes and praises our great qualities, then we should think that this is the result of me having praised others in previous lives, me not having blamed others in previous lives. And now as a result, I am being praised in this life. But then also I have to analyze, do I really possess these qualities that the other person is expressing? If the other person is calling me a great scholar, am I really a great scholar? Or am I really so virtuous? Or am I really so great? If I do not actually possess these qualities, then just by the other person expressing these qualities, I do not actually get these qualities. So there is no point in being happy about being praised about something that I don't actually possess. But likewise, if somebody blames me, there is no need to be unhappy about that. If somebody expresses my faults, then again, I have to analyze, do I possess these faults or not, without getting angry. And if I do not possess these faults that the other person expresses, then there is no reason for me to be angry at them. Why would I get angry at them if I don't even have that fault? And then if I do have that fault that the other person is expressing, then this person really becomes like a teacher to me, because they're exposing a fault that I was unaware of myself. And it's really true, I really possess that fault. So now, seeing the fault clearly, I can do something to change that, change the fault into a quality. And so in this way, we do not become upset when somebody expresses our faults or criticizes us. And so if somebody criticizes us, I would also then think that I have criticized that person in the past and now in a previous life. And so now this is ripening in the form of being blamed. May the suffering of samsara in the other person also become purified. And so again, this is how we can remain in a state of peace and happiness. If on the other hand, we feel offended when somebody criticizes us and then we retaliate and then speak about their faults, we would never find peace and happiness in our minds that way. And so now, as a beginning practitioner, we will not be able to instantly be patient with all offense that we receive from others. And again, here in the beginning, we first need to have an aspiration to practice patience with that. So we need to also habituate to the thought of that. We visualize in a way being blamed. So you imagine how somebody insults you, how somebody offends you, criticizes you, blames you, and then how you would react in that situation. Or you imagine how somebody praises you, how somebody tells you what a great scholar you are, how virtuous you are, how wonderful you are. And then visualize or imagine how you would react to that, and how you would reflect, do I really have these qualities of scholarship and virtue and so forth or not? Or do I really have these faults I'm being accused of or not? And so in this way, you can practice, train the mind in practicing patience by imagining these scenarios happening. So in the beginning, we should be able to first have an aspiration towards being able to practice in this way.
당보 된대지 공부시 곰 메바 메바 람체 잡으러 다 대단도 소드나 메바 람체 잡으러 메바진 근데 되게 제대로 가르 공부시 돈을 야고 요래서나 근데 나랑지 강사되게 저 소소기 저어이네야래 소소 마가서 미디기 소소라지 칭년바 마르와 되네 메라다 용도 사마나 되네 소소semla 마가지 게임 거와 나데 마가지 게와 곰 당본냐라 묘곰 지오래 묘곰 지곰 되네 되게 제라 되네 소소기 저원데 소소 드리는 곰데 여러와 되게 칭년바 마와다 다든 곰 바르와 묘바체네 되네 곰 아니 되게 제라 되네 가사되게 된데 책임바 마바 소소 원용도 삼아 간자지는 고 소소게 마가사 민송자 나사 셈라지 거기 나라 된데제 라소 삼성장고 남도샤 그러봐 마가지 남도지 장용 그러봐 대용도 삼아나 되네 아예 가사 소소 마가사긴 저우 많이 저우디 되네 간 공고고요 많이 소리 되는 저우디 레서나 되는 저우디 가반데로 거기 고전에 방바적게 봐도 되네 다시 당으로 된 저우디 가반데스 난 저우 자시 생이지나 되네 자시 생이데 가와 된 고전에 방바적 봐도 다든 제나 되네 녀야요 말 알아서 셈진 남도 그지 지 소연이 되네 건데 용되고 여러 되네 잡으려데 녀녀에서 용되고 여러 아니 도시는 공부시행 곰 아니 되게 제대로 되네 소소 마기바 전에 가서 소소년 되네 마기바 전에 소리했어요 되네 뭐전에 방바제 봐도 되네 다제지는 공고 아니 도시 곰이나 다든 제나 되네 주니니야요 니야요 말에 되네 소소 셈라지 샤응고 와 샤응고를 샤원나 신기 동네지냐요 와 동네지냐 동네냐와 보지 여번도 보지 난거 요래 아니 책년바 보 마와보 책년바 마와보지야 지 주려도 지 여번도 보지 말아서 나용도 삼만단데 다제 친구 뭐 제니 되는 되면데 때만 다제 제는 다든잖아 바로 반대 마와보 가사되냐 니지요 말에 이 마야기 책되냐 가냐 연구돼 다제 제바이나 용사 되네 연구도 세진 알아서 도도지 저거도니 니지요 알아서나 요 말에 담제 동배랑 하시래요 와 어도래 되네 대인데 삼마 마와보 가사되냐 요 말에 동해 용화보 가사되냐 소소게 나왔다도 요래서는 대요 말 요 말에 있는 소소 쌤 주명원기 되네 대 연구요 와 대인데 삼마다 도시 공부시용도 삼마나 되네 다들 챘나 되네 니야메바티 나라 되네 쌤르데 제되네 샤 되네 도지네 샤진 공통나 되네 야고요 그래서 담보 몇번 잡으세 근데 제마 되네 갈래 되네 로데야야 검지 체를 주도 삼마나 되네 소소 마가사 가사되게 책 년바 하장기 년바 많이 봐체 예자 책이야 책 년바 인바 간시라 예자 책대 대한 잠바게 마반데 되네 소소 몇바시네 되는 검고요 몇바시는 검 그러와 야나 그런 것도 마바 검 영어서 마 가사되게 소소라 매바 검니 되네 디제들 가는 공부시에 그래서나 되네 많이 가사되 나오더냐 가wande로 디 마제지 책이야 책년반대야 가wan데 소소게 셈라 낭반나신데 면데 다제시 되네 디 나와 터바보 나와 되는 동네 영화보 가사라니야 되네 뭐 동네 영화보 가사되야 되네 가wan데 간대진데 동네 영예데 간대진데 와 어때도 세탁시 전에 되네 도 공부시 갈래시나 아니 그 세단 된소야 용용 도고래로와 아니 대용용 도와이나 되네 셈라야 되네 디진디야 체체 용거래 되네 다가나시 신심제 게되네 라고 통용도 삼아야 되네 잠바다 닌제세와디 Ini kale shine de ko rimbe phe no ko ba ma do tema chi na namsang ko de chi yong to ya ngaran zo ka kale kha ko re kharasana che ko thoma me ba ni thi wang de chi ni ko shuk chen bo yin de sama namsang kale kha ko res to se ni re cho wa na na ta ngaran zo no da mo ngaran zo cho wa na na de de da ga ra de ne chi 되네 땀 많이 땀 년바 지대 최계 원계되는 동해 마무 정하나 좋다 닌다르시다 지 용되게 여러 와다 뒤값서 년라 매바 남제 잡지 아니 뒤기 제라 되는 것을 오소소근 자오다 소소 마가사게 미기 되게 마용데 되는 도 되는 공부시기 시기잖아 아니 간장진의 셈들라 되는 셔단의 충충중 셔단의 충충중은 잠 되는 잠박이 셈데 대슈 체르체노와 잠박이 셈데 슈 체르체르노나 얘는 디지데 슈 체르체르노야 되고 다시 고추니를 봐 도스레스.
So first we have to habituate to this aspiration. So we have to imagine it. And so that is also called taking the aspiration as the path. And then once we have taken it as the path, and then we can actually practice it with the actual enemy, or the one that insults us, or the one who blames us, the one who criticizes us. So first we have to bring that to mind and imagine that. We imagine a person like an enemy or somebody that we dislike or dislikes us, to insult us, to criticize us. So then you imagine, oh, this is what he said. He insulted me, he criticized me. And so normally when somebody criticizes us, it generates a certain feeling, a thought in our mind. So then when that arises, then we meditate, we practice with that thought arising. And then you reflect, so this enemy that has insulted me, where actually is that enemy? Let's say his name is Tashi. Where is Tashi? So you investigate the person from head to toes. Can you find Tashi, this person, anywhere between the legs, between the head and the toes? You cannot find the person there. It's all a creation of your own mind. So it's just something that I label. This is my enemy. This is my friend. There is nothing actually that truly exists if I investigate this person. Is it in the head, in the legs? Where is that person? It is just a mental fabrication that's creating suffering in my mind. And so there is this person that criticizes me, and it appears to be real. But then if I actually analyze it, then I can't find that person that is criticizing me, insulting me. And then also, what about the words that the person is using to criticize me? Where are those words? I can't actually point my finger at these words. They are also empty. They're empty, an empty echo. So the words and the person both don't actually exist the way they appear to exist. They just appear a certain way from the perspective of my confused state of mind. But if I really reflect on it, then actually the person and the insult cannot be found. And so this is how you should first meditate through this aspiration of being able to practice with the person when it actually happens later on. So first we just imagine how somebody insults us with negative words. And then we imagine how we react in a kind and gentle way. And then you reflect, so that person that's insulting me, where is that person? And where are the words that the person is using? Does the person and the words actually exist the way they appear? And then me, the one who is affected, the suffering I experience, where does that exist? Where does the suffering exist? Where does the offended myself exist? And if you analyze in this way, then slowly the anger will decrease. And as the anger decreases, your mind will be more happy. And so later, when you then are in the face of that enemy, slowly love and compassion for them will increase. But it's very difficult to cultivate such compassion instantly, to be able to practice patience with that instantly, because we have habituated to reacting in a certain way since beginningless time. But we turn this around through habituating to it day by day, each and every day. So each and every day I'm having now, on the other hand, I'm each and every day having habituated to those 8 worldly concerns and to our attachment to fame and gain and so on. And then our attachment to these has increased. So it's difficult to turn it around in an instant. In the beginning, we have to develop some kind of aspiration. We have to imagine it. And then later, when we are actually in the face of that person, it will be easier to practice with that. Because as we practice through this imagination, our anger for such people will naturally decrease. And as our anger decreases, our love for them, our compassion increases. And if our love increases, then naturally our mind will be more happy. So.
gomba tela ya tene o jojo gomba chi da tene chadang ge yu la denshin pong se subject do ni yu be na ne ne jojo gomba de sung go yosare subject do jojo gomba de jitar nawa de da rang sem ni de ne jebe ta dang chel ini shin ne sung se chama nam yela mi jin ge se la ne yin sar ne jitar nawa de da rang sem nganzo naranzo sang ne 나와 로와 오 간데 진내주 산역에 나와 다 마다게 나와 간데 저 중반이야 탐제 되네 심리기 추주제 송으로 봐 심리기 추주제 심리기 추주제 소리로 봐 얘네야 심리 거라야 되네 되네 간데 제레스나 죄베 타다 제와지제 송으로 봐 심리 되네 죄베 타다제 디니신의 손제 참만 심리 세대 심 그런 게 랑신대야 네 도마 매번에 죄배 타다 저와지지 동반이지랑 시제 성거를 디시에바 얘나 이는 송한다 진배 참마 손진기 참만남 이는 시기를 성거를 이네 어디 인데 참마 되네 일람이지 예세라네 예 성거를 어디 손진기 참에 일람 마셔봐로 어디는 심지 내로 그런 저저인 바디 시에나 아니 손적이 내데 송한다 진배 참에 내를 주그래 손제 이 문제에서 전주 선반 남지야 대신 되네 된 공부를 된 말한 속에야 되는 공부를 손제다.
So this in brief was the discussion on the 8 worldly concerns, where we take aspiration as the path. So mainly we habituate that through aspiring, and that also completes those 10 headings we mentioned. And so of the relative and ultimate bodhicitta, that also completes the relative bodhicitta. And then next we come to the ultimate bodhicitta, which has a twofold division. One is to recognize the unelaborated mind, and the other one is to abandon a clinging attachment. So the first one, recognizing the unelaborated mind, is verse number 22. Appearances are one's own mind. From the beginning, mind's nature is free from the extremes of elaboration. Knowing this, not to engage the mind in subject-object duality, is the Bodhisattva's practice. So appearances, whether they're positive or negative or pure or impure, are nothing but the appearance of one's own mind, the projection of one's own mind. And that mind itself, since the beginningless times primordially, is free from the extremes of elaboration. When one recognizes this, the mind will not engage in a subject-object duality. So this is how the Bodhisattvas have practiced, and we should practice similarly.
소소 잡아게서 유유로와 대란 dension 뽕. 오 대송고서래. 자유란 dension 뽕. 네 대송고서래. 얘도 오위 유다 채바나 이야기 뒤지 자진 지신도 제바나야 덴바르메다시 신샤뽕 게셀라니 인스. 그냥 알아서 유도 오위로와 유다 채용도 참말라 대 유도 채용도 꽤 가르샤르스나 이야기 뒤지 자선하시래서 야가기 자선디 자디 가르에서나 고진 가르에서나 차바잡 근데 텔 니마샤 용도 삼아 근데 차바기 축이 시디다 니마기 조인이디 차바라 때네 나가랑아랑 전 자샤고 요르와 진 되게 지는 자샤고 요르와 대나신디네 소소기 자유 유디 채용데 제바 난거 요르 예스펜 제바 난거 요르데 제바 남바나신디네 제바 요르베서나 요 말이에요. 나마다도 만져봐요. 예선선 때문에 대라 자유를 심바 마시에 손에도 심바 방으로에 손. 이게서 전체 선반남지야. 냠스 냠바를 말한 속에 냠스 냠으로에 손.
So the mind primordially is naturally without any stain. Just like the nature of water is clear. The nature of water is not muddy. And so similarly, the nature of the mind is without the extremes of elaboration, is clear. So then second is to abandon attachment to the true existence of sense objects. That's verse number 23. When encountering pleasing sense objects, though they appear beautiful like a rainbow in summertime, not to regard them as real and to abandon clinging attachment is the Bodhisattva's practice. So, for example, when we encounter a beautiful rainbow in summertime, the rainbow in summertime appears as a result of the rain and sun coming together. So the conditions of warmth, heat, and moisture coming together produce the appearance of a rainbow. And so similarly, various objects of our attachment, of sense objects, appear to us, but do they really exist in the beautiful way that they appear to us? They do not exist that way. They just appear to us that way. And therefore, it is the Bodhisattva's practice to abandon clinging attachment, and we should practice in a similar way.
동해 나서 멜란 포시다 춘난 덴버스미 아단치스 디시르 미딘젠다 체베스 추바다 게셀라니 인소리 네 가라소게 동해 탐제로와 네 멜란 페나 멜란 나나 페나 아마지라 보고 보지에나 보디든 아마디 멜란 나나 페나 보고디 베시바 멜란 땅바이나 아마딜라 페 셈라 동해 용거와 네 보디 뭐마 시요마데 멜란 나시바 나마르데 이내야 코 뭐마 레선 심 트베원게드네 덴바르소네드네 코벤 동해 망보 냥거와 어디는 냥거래요 소리 빼들어와 빼대나신데네 알아줘야 네심 트베원게 네 동해 탐제 심 추발을 때네 이거요 그래서와 미팅비진다 칸데진네 채용도 참말라 디 심 추배원게 디원도 태우나 되는 동네 양고 디 신왕도 소나 알아서 동네 양고요. 와 디인디스 디용도 참아라 되는 디원도 만들어 가지고 버려서 되는 심 추배원게 중과인바디 따버려서 와 심 추배원게 중과인바디 소소 시합을 쳐버려 인원적 개세 전주 선반남지냐 동네 탐지 중사디 와 심 추바 말이바 와 디원게 중과디 되는 도시니 나라야 도시에서 전주 선반남지냐 도스 냠스 렘바레 나란서게냐 되네 도스 냠스 렘바레 송고에서 단단도 잡으데.
So this is to abandon the attachment or belief in the true existence of pleasurable objects, and then second is the abandoning the belief in the true existence of disagreeable circumstances. And that's verse number 24. Diverse sufferings are like the death of a child in a dream. By apprehending illusory appearances as real, one becomes weary. Therefore, when encountering disagreeable circumstances, viewing them as illusory is the Bodhisattva's practice. So all suffering are like the death of a child in a dream. When a child dies in a dream, then the mother experiences great suffering, but the child didn't really die, it's just a dream. But the mother thinks it's real because the mind is confused. And because we believe things to be real, we experience a lot of suffering. So it is the source of all suffering is this confused state of mind. And so we encounter all kinds of circumstances, and then we believe in their true existence, and then being under the sway of such confusion, as a result, we experience much suffering. So as the Bodhisattvas do not fall under the power of such confusion, but they recognize it when it arises. They recognize that the source of all suffering is such confusion, is such ignorance of mind. And so they have practiced abandoning such confusion, and we should practice in a similar way.
Sumba simjeji labja sine de sabje sumba adine male ge sare simjeji labja de la ya ni chinju gi nyamne shege do jiso phaji ju gi nyamne eso adine maje jimbe nyamne la labse sungu yu sare chanju de be lu ya tanggo na chiru ngobo nam me chugos deje lenda na mi mere jimba tong ge se na ni so 얘네 양다번 조베 상예지 전주 톱고고여나 얘네 류 조베 상계적 bomba 톱에 셔도 류 땅고고여나 얘네 추르기 나란 종업은 주노로 절로 소바디 짐바 땅고바디 베 이인 가래 송거와 점제 뒤에서서 짐바 간데 지땅바이네야 아니 이 짐바디 땅바이나 알아 드부 야고지 연구를 레와 치지요 레서 근데 지 알아 파 상부지 지나 미기 제만 알아 초 상부지 체계에서인데 넘버 또 된대지 체계에서는 남이 레와 치야요 말이야 소리 메베 원이 아니 짐바디 땅바이나 이 게세 전주 선반은 짐베 냠내 작으래 소리.
So this completes the ultimate bodhicitta, and with that we come to the third overall section of the text, which are the precepts of bodhicitta, or the practices of bodhicitta, and that is mainly the practices of the 6 paramitas. We're starting with generosity, verse number 25. If it is necessary to give away even one's body while aspiring to enlightenment, what need is there to mention external objects? Therefore, practicing generosity without hope of reciprocation or positive karmic results is the Bodhisattva's practice. If we need to give away even our bodies, in order to attain the state of enlightenment, then there is no need to mention actual material offerings. And when we make offerings, when we are being generous, we should be generous without any hopes for reciprocation. That is, if I'm giving something away, I should not have any hopes of getting something in return. Or if I'm helping someone, I should have no hopes of that person reciprocating my goodwill in the future. So without any hopes of receiving anything in return, we should practice generosity. And this is how the Bodhisattvas have practiced.
이기 잡지 이내에 지 배자기 된다지 이내에 마싱바 소소라지 지용나 얘라바 소소 삼바심지 상봉게 돈이 제주심지 꾸년라니 근데 니메들라바 셰바이나 대한 진배냠네 자고요 봐. 뭐 대자고요. 이제 민지지를 진배냠네서나 사주제고요, 통주제고요, 라고 그거요. 근데 미지 투바이네 봐 좀시시지 제와이네 게모 잡지 좀시시지 제와이네 미디기 삼바심지 야부지 꾸년라니로 미들라 좀시시지 땜바이네 한종고 미들라 대화지 총소나 대한 진배냠네 자고요. 봐. 딘데라고요. 신지 미지 진배냠네스니데 안 주노 롱제메다 안 진배냠네 지하면도서 삼령 안송 공부 코र्स를 봐. 투라든데 코र्स를 봐. 인지 민지 공부 시행고요. 그래서 진배냠네 제다만 보여요.
So for generosity, we might think that the only way to practice generosity is if we actually have something material to give to someone. For example, we can give them food or drink or clothing or money. But that's not all there is to generosity. That's not absolutely necessary. Of course, giving those material things is generosity, but there's also other ways of practicing generosity as well. For example, even if you don't have any material things to give, if you meet somebody who is in need, who is experiencing suffering, and you have a good heart for them, you have a kind thought for them, and you smile at them, you're kind to them, you treat them with kindness, even if you don't give them a material thing. If you smile at them, for example, if you treat them with kindness, they will experience some happiness. And so in this way, you have been generous to them. So you might think that being generous just means to give things. And if you're poor and have no things to give, you can't be generous. And that's really not true. There's many different ways of being generous.
수준에 바란데 메드나 신데 로바데 게모네스 대제시비 듬바 메바이 수준 소원게 세라네 인소리 근데 미기주부 미기주부 그 수준 소네 소소 타바 란데 타바 룸마토나 얘는 이 신데 루비 인세야 데베 게모 쇼야게 네레 소리 봐 좀제 디 송사 얘는 니나 차셔 메베고 네 수준 송고야 돼
And then second is the paramita of ethical discipline. That's verse number 26. If lacking ethical conduct, one fails to achieve one's own purpose, the wish to accomplish others' purpose is laughable. Therefore, guarding ethics devoid of aspirations for worldly existence is the Bodhisattva's practice. If we want if we want to accomplish the purpose of others and we fail to even accomplish our own purpose by practicing ethical discipline, so then our wish to help others is really absurd or laughable. So therefore, it is the practice of bodhisattvas to be ethical without any hopes for aspirations for worldly existence. This is the way of the bodhisattvas practice, and we should practice in a similar way.
Yeah. And then this is 단다. 먼저 다른 초즈니 마도 되세요 말봐. 인데 sama chozi chega zaji pasu kurang zuyon chiwa chinen rabo yona, chiwa rabo yona, yang di tuzi chi tangna samsungwa, tangda chozi kazi za chingde don, yin de chozi kimendwa, chozi kazi chingsuwe tuzi, chozi ching rongsuwe,
Tana chik gaman chunga dosang.
o ya ta, de shinde sama, de sama yok za rubin yarwa, je de ta, chiwa chinen gi chik tuzi de za shana samsu, rwa de yaqo nwa de za chi.
So we have time for 2 hours for this session, and so I thought of also leaving about half an hour for questions. So that gives us another 15 minutes for a teaching. So I will speed up the teachings.
Gewe longje debe gese la neje damje rinje terda sum deje gun la sheje me ba soba gun ba gese la li sum ro ine gewe longje debe dine gese chanju semba nam la ine gewe longje se de samata neje debe chunjum ro simje tenje gi chunjum gewa chude ji chunjum sum go yo ro te to de la gewe longje sum go yo sare gese chanju semba namji di tangdo lingyo yore, ruwa debi gesa la neje damji rinche terda song song re. Koranzo la nyoba chi negi, nyoba khande chi chewa ine, tenzo be longche tabu, rinche ter tabu, be tende re song re, tenzo 심지에 대달라 되네 게세 전주 sembanam지 되네 현재 지금 말해서 뭐 컨셉 지금 말해서 뭐 리제 때냐 봤나지 되네 당도 랭그레서 뭐 되달라 서바 공그레서 뭐 내제 가사 되달라 서바 공그레서 되 게세 말레레스
And so the next 27, to bodhisattvas who desire the pleasures of virtue, all those who do harm are like a precious treasure. Therefore, cultivating patience devoid of hostility is the bodhisattva's practice. So the pleasures of virtue, I have a wealth of virtue. A wealth of virtue is the different kinds, the 3 kinds of discipline. It is the discipline of refraining from engaging in negative actions, the discipline of gathering virtues, and the discipline of benefiting beings. So those bodhisattvas who desire such a wealth of virtue, for them, all those who do harm are like a precious treasure, meaning that when someone harms them, they will be without hostility, but they will accept the harm with patience. So this is how bodhisattvas are practiced.
다 수바 디에스 슈스 마체다 시바 춘주 춘주 퍼싱기 냠내 송고요서 란데 마시 주베 니라야 볼라 미션 도다 춘톤 조고 텐도 인데 주니 춘주 좀 바뀌세 라니 예송리 에네 에네 란데 타르바 잠 텐도 니베 니라야 에네 베 감숨 고르에 동에 등도 통용데 네 녀란 등족이야. 되는 고라 메쇼바는 생각하면서 고라 메바나 때는 빠마스 텔라즈베 티체는 메디세야를 시부 정글을 봐. 어배 녀란 등족이야. 근데 정글을 해서 고라 동에 디 고라 동에 되라. 되는 님보 메바. 세니 되는 배 준비 좀니 되는 배 타벼 공부 디체그레스. 근데 게세 자주 생바 남지 란덤 바시기 체도 타르바 텐도 니기 레베스나 데 마레스. 가르스나 되는 로아르 좀 심지 탐지 된도 되네 뭐 도배 상계적 공부 도배체도 있는 준비치 그래 성으로와 시시니가게 탈은 저체도 되는 준비치 그래 성으로
So that was patience, and then next is diligence. Verse number 28. Even heroes and solitary realizers who accomplish only their own welfare strive as if putting out a fire on their heads. Seeing this, taking up diligent effort, the source of good qualities for the sake of all beings, is the bodhisattva's practice. So even there's heroes and solitary realizers strive for liberation as if putting out a fire on their heads. So they strive for liberation from the 3 realms of samsara as if putting out a fire on their head. So if our head was on fire, we would be quite in a hurry to put out that fire. And so similarly, those heroes in solitary realizers strive to become liberated from samsara. But then the bodhisattvas, do they strive in a similar way for their own sake? They do not strive for their own sake, but they strive in such a way in order to bring all sentient beings of the 6 realms to the state of enlightenment, to liberate them from the extremes of existence and peace.
Tene latongi tene nyomomba number jumper chikre sonda shera bi songo yorwa ta tanda dodo de laton se de te kapso tene nyomon number jom go go yana ta te dame to be shera o tongani o to be tene loy tene nyomomba number jumper chikre se ne so me shile yanda de ba yesi de sama naga ta namshe de chiame sisi samde shi yorwa o te songo yosare de shele de ni ini doji tabu samding tini ngombar chikari es gesi chanchi zimba namji ini jesunggu yusari.
And so next is the paramita of meditative concentration. It's verse number 29. Having understood that disturbing emotions are destroyed by insight possessed with tranquil abiding, to cultivate meditative concentration which perfectly transcends the 4 formless absorptions, the Bodhisattva's practice. So it is the vipassana that is based on calm abiding that destroys the afflictive emotions. Or in other words, in order to destroy the afflictive emotions, one must attain their wisdom that realizes selflessness. And this wisdom then transcends the 4 formless absorptions of, and those 4 formless absorptions are like a boundless consciousness, boundless sky, nothing whatsoever. Can you shiba the karere?
Ataya namshe de chiame sisi shi yorwa namga taya namshe chiame sisi chini samding shi yorwa sumegi shi yorwa.
And the 4th one is a verse she the guy called Thompson. Sishi. I can't remember the 4th one now, but you can check it out. As though it is the Bodhisattva's practice to practice calm abiding, to practice vipassana on the basis of calm abiding. So.
Tuba sherabji parjina lapse sungo yusari. Sherab mena paru chingayi zobe chanchu toba minebe tabdan deji kursun medobe sheragomba gese lali serwa. Ene o sheraji parjingi nyamne meba yena ne jimba tsudun soba tsundru samdengi parjinga yoba yene ya zobe chanchu top togu mare este top toga yomara sherab mena nyomomba pantu ya yomare ne sheje jiba pantu go yomare wa. Te indi samala tene o sherab de gore ya sungwarse sherab de mena zobe chanchu toba top togu mare ne tabdan deji kursun medobe sheragomba gese lali yesu. o tab tene chanchu jisem dembe go ne kursun medoba asena tene ngaranzo namtar gosum yorwa o tegi go ne tene o sherab ki o parji tene ta tongba ni tobe losene mendo dame tobe losene mendo o tene gomres te gomba ina tene nyumo ba de sheje jiba pamar chigre songo yesri ta kanda dor dena parjin chuga gore yes zobe sanje gomba pamar chebala parjin chuga gore yes parjin chuga nyamlen gore.
And the number 6 is the paramita of wisdom. It's verse number 30. If one lacks wisdom, it is impossible to attain perfect enlightenment through the other 5 perfections. Thus, cultivating skillful means with the wisdom that does not discriminate among the 3 spheres is the Bodhisattva's practice. So even if one possesses the other 5 paramitas, if one lacks the paramita of wisdom, one cannot attain complete enlightenment. So without wisdom, one cannot fully abandon the afflictive emotions, and therefore will not attain complete enlightenment. This wisdom that transcends the 3 spheres it relates to the 3 gates of complete liberation. So through these 3 gates of complete liberation, one develops wisdom, and with wisdom one realizes emptiness, one realizes selflessness, and so that realization then abandons the afflictive emotions and the subtle obscurations to omniscience. And only when these 6 are complete can one attain complete enlightenment.
Rangi chuto pango di sungu yusari. Rangi chuba yorwa di pango di sungu yusari. Rangi chuba rangi matana chebe suji chumi chesebe dije jindo rangi chuba la tanya bongo gese la len yin sori. Tene rangi seme chuba di soso ki tache chabu re sungu re. Rawa di ma cheba yena tene legbe chalan rugundu rawa mi legbe chalan rugundu semde bosungi choba khande chi chigundu luji choba khande chigundu 마게 간데 지금도 이지 저럼 간데 지금도 로와 공부 시간 간데 되게 소소 일이 지는 소소 샘줄로 딱지 쳐버려요. 그런데 마치바이나 치다낭나 쳐봤다 보통 바이네야 나도 되니 되니 뇨모바게 되송기 되니야 메셈 바르니 되니 주민기 되니 레 제스기를 해서 좀전 뒤송자 뒤준도 되니 라소랑이 보송기 줘봐라. 얘네 딱제 쳐버려서 근데 딱제 제니 얘네 밀레게 차 쭝기 차도나 얘네 팀도 빵을 쳐버려서 되게서 changes in their managers.
And then next is the verse on abandoning one's own confusions. It's verse number 31. If having merely the appearance of a practitioner, one does not investigate one's own mistakes, it is possible to act contrary to the Dharma. Therefore, constantly examining one's own errors and abandoning them is the Bodhisattva's practice. So we must always investigate our own confusions. If we do not investigate our own confusions, we are unaware of what actions we actually engage in. So we should always, each and every day, examine what is the state of my body, what am I doing with my body, what am I doing with my speech, what arises in my mind. Because if we don't do that, we may put on an outer appearance of being very peaceful and subdued, but inside of our mind we might be blazing with afflictive emotions. And then it's possible that we may act contrary to the Dharma. And so therefore it is important to always examine our 3 doors of body, speech, and mind. And if we find a fault, that we abandon that fault. This is how the Bodhisattvas have practiced.
Gese chanchu sembala nyeba mawar pangmo de sunggu sare nyemo wangi gese shendagi nyeba lena dani nyamjurbe tiba chelo shube kasagi nyeba me gese la ne sunggu oda nyomo me wangi tene gese chanchu sembara wa ola tene o jönje je yomare sunggu jön lingje yomare ste dema ina tene soso tiba chembola shube kasagi tene nyeba me masar tene soso tiba chemboge jesu shu wa 쇼차인데 참말라 근데 대답하게 계세 전주 선반남라야 근데 네바 맞아요 말이에요. 서로 네바 링주요 말이에요. 근데 네바 링바이나 소소게 전주 선 냠도 그래 소그래. 전주 선에 냠도 그래. 근데 또봐 뭐 제어 또봐 소소게 줄라 냠도 제어 네바 된소야. 근데 된소 근데 제발라 반 지버치 그래. 대 송자 근데 피부 첨보라 쉬베더니 change semba namla ne nyaba maje res de gese change semba namji ne nyamne res muisre.
Next is the verse on abandoning criticizing or like looking at the faults of bodhisattvas. It's verse number 32. If influenced by disturbing emotions, one points out another bodhisattva's faults, oneself is diminished. Therefore, not speaking about the faults of those who have entered the great vehicle is the bodhisattva's practice. And so one must not point out the faults of someone who has entered the great vehicle. And if one does point out their faults with an afflicted mind, oneself actually diminishes, one's own qualities of experience and realization will diminish as a result. And therefore, it is a bodhisattva's practice not to speak about the faults of another bodhisattva who has entered the great vehicle.
Oh, that 진다게 되는 침나 차바 방고인데 송고 사례다 니그루 왕기 편수 쯔주신 퇴상고는 저와 냠줄라 자시 침다 진다 침남라 차바 방게 세라리에서 오 되는 진다게 주노 롱주르와 진나 오 니바스나다는 소소로 주노 롱주 송고와 디 토바게 제도되는 편수베 저바자고 제바이나 아니 디 셴왕도 송니 되는 퇴바 삼바 공바 이 자와 탐제라 되는 계획치 그래야 되는 자와 냠그래 성우리 전제 뒤에 성사되는 소속의 자시 조고 이내래 이내 소속의 진다 이내래 등속의 준노롱제 이는 낭든솔라 이는 말한서 차바께지 차바치지요 그래서 우리 차바 방우래 성우리 그래서 차바이나 이니 진짜 저바 용무래 성우리 니고 준노롱제 그치 이 용바에는 대성의 자와 냠버치를 냠그리에 소리 대성자 결에 잡아 봐오죠. 그래서 계속 전체 선반남지 라군 냠슬렘버에 말한 속에 냠슬렘버에 소리.
The next is to abandon attachment to households, and that's verse number 33. Because the influence of gain and respect causes quarreling and the decline of the activities of listening, pondering, and meditation, to abandon attachment to the households of friends, relations, and benefactors is the Bodhisattva's practice. And so when we become attached to households and relations and benefactors and the wealth that they provide, that will only lead to conflict and quarreling. And then being in the midst of caught up in conflict and quarreling, our activities of listening, pondering, and meditations will decline. And therefore, we should abandon attachment to the households of friends, relations, and benefactors. Because if we become attached to them, it will lead to conflict and our virtuous activities will decline. So this is how the Bodhisattvas have practiced, and this is how we should practice as well.
이제 뚝치 마월 빵고버디 송고스 요사레 칙tuk부여와 디마와 어디 빵고버디 송고요사레 좀모치기 신심 축주르신 예외세지 주진냠주르 내지 신기 예도 미모에 칙tuk부한게세 라메 예사레 얘는 알아서 칙tuk부마와이나 아니 신심 신기심 축버치그레세르와 얘는 예외세지 되니 줘봐야 냠버치그레스 점제 뒤에 송사 되니 미셴발라 되니 칙tuk부 마와와 되니 칙상보 칙 잠보 아니 마고야 돼 계세 전제 선반남지 남내제 말한속에 그래 송사.
And the next is the verse on abandoning harsh words, verse number 34. Because harsh words disturb others' minds and cause the bodhisattva's conduct to deteriorate, abandoning harsh speech, which is unpleasant to others, is the bodhisattva's practice. So when we speak harshly to others, it will disturb their minds. And then the conduct of the bodhisattvas declines. And therefore, the bodhisattvas do not speak harshly to others, but instead they speak to them in a kind way. And we should practice in a similar way.
뭐다 념념뭐 방고반데 송고에서 념모 곰나 념보 도가에 제 제시지위 념보 순수네 차서 념모 담보제마다 뭐좀 좀 계세라네 예소리 얘네 념모바데라베 콤바텐소나 얘네 념모바데베 방가고 예소 도바카오스는 방가고 예스 좀제 대소서 전바다 시신 뭐 제시 템보게 보니 얘네 뭐 제시 템보게 보니 님보기 춘수네 배낭하면서 천자다보데 얘네 제시 이번에 되니 뭐 되니 차소 녀몬 봐 얘네 뭐 당보 소소 줄을 제대로 되니 막 보좀 제거해서 막 매버서 그래서 보좀 제거해서 문제 계속 자주 선반남지 도스니 냠서 냠버레스 나란 속에 도스 냠서 냠버레스 우리다디 강가디 진짜 공도 쉬선 버르러 와 근데 지대 최게 거지 로서 얘네 막 어다 대다 버르러 대다 불로 깨용데 얘네 말아서 막 보좀 제거 어디 계속 자주 선반남지
And then next is the verse on abandoning the afflictive emotion. It's verse number 35. When disturbing emotions are habituated, it is difficult to overcome them with antidotes. By arming oneself with the antidotal weapon of mindfulness to destroy disturbing emotions such as desire the moment they first arise is the Bodhisattva's practice. So once we have habituated to the afflictive emotions, it is very difficult to abandon them. So therefore, we should use the antidotal weapon of mindfulness, of stable introspection and mindfulness that recognizes them the very moment that they arise. So we need to counter the afflictive emotions, oppose them right away as soon as they arise. So this is how the Bodhisattvas have practiced, and this is how they have practiced in countering, remedying the 8 worldly concerns. And so we should practice in a similar way.
다 진식이 된 dorducheni sunggoyosar manduini dorna kangdo cholam chichechang rangi simchi nekab chindashe jendo chen shishin tenba yi shinder dhuba gese lani yinsa doro dhuba yina tene cholam sosoki gosumki cholam kandi chi cheba yina ya yini sosoki simdela takshe cheba yade kechambur yes tuyo jendo tene chembanda shishin rwa ti denbe goni tene 고성기 좁아 신대 간데 진주바 있네요. 전바다 시신지 되면 보내더니 신대 주고 레스트 계속 전주 선반을 지라네. 예스.
And then is the verse on mindfulness in brief, verse number 36. In brief, whatever conduct one engages in, one should ask, what is the state of my mind? Accomplishing others' purpose through constantly maintaining mindfulness and awareness is the Bodhisattva's practice. So at all times, in whatever one does with body, speech, and mind, in all one's activities, it is important to always analyze what is the state of my mind, to always sustain mindfulness and awareness, and in this way accomplishing the purpose of others with body, speech, and mind. So this is how the Bodhisattvas have practiced.
다 개왕어디 있어. 대단히 준비해 주빈 개왕남 타연로의 동에 세제칠 코스 넘버를 답이 시럽지 전중어 기세라는 예서. 다뭐 계세 전주 선반남지 네. 파리 지소 파진 둘라 소바는 전이 내가 냠서 레니 냠서 렘빈 개왕남 이는 타 남가다냐면 타의 심지어 담지 이는 동행이 자서 첨부를 제외치도 이네 대사 랑기사비 개완남 이네 코손 넘버 답에 보니 아니 코손 넘버 답에로 지심에 보니 이네 조장 토베치도 이네 뭐와 제우리에 something 계속 전주서 만남지야 냠설렘 바래 말은 속이야 개와 간데 지사바이네야 도스치니 뭐고리에 something.
And then lastly is the verse on dedication, dedicating our virtues. It's verse number 37. In order to clear away the suffering of limitless beings through the wisdom realizing the purity of the 3 spheres, to dedicate the virtue attained by making such effort for enlightenment is the Bodhisattva's practice. So the Bodhisattvas strive to clear away the suffering of all limitless beings, as limitless as space, to liberate them from the vast ocean of suffering. In order to liberate them from suffering, the Bodhisattvas dedicate all roots of virtue that are and without not being tainted by the three spheres. So non-conceptually, they dedicate all virtues for the sake of enlightenment. So this is how the Bodhisattvas have practiced, and this is how we should dedicate our own virtues.
다 되게 바르라 된저 주체니까 톱디 디르스를 가시 된저니에 까와니 데 개왕고에 바르라 쇼로가 숨주 소드인디 저저조 진이 송바 송자다 게셀안레 소드마세 첸 토고야 돼 좀제 데리다 되냐마 다 조그레와 숨바 좀바 숨바 sabje sumba dene zomba tarchima jogi tuyensi ya diri. A dene maa doju tenje nam sungbe tuyens, tamba namji sungi jen rannes, gese namje lanle sumju di, gese lamla lobde tuyengi kyo sung. A dek tuyenda kare sungurasana, owa sanje je sungbe do, jinju keba namji sungbe tenje, dene tenzu ne sungbe ge dene tuyen nyingbo duyene, dene tamba, jibu tamba namji o nyamso le, 오 투줄라 똑바 충 대답하기 기부 대답이 제소 장네 내 게세 남지 내네 게세 전주 선반 남지 냠술 렌다 간데 친이 냠술 렌고 유메데 내네 자와 쇼라가 숨주 소드인지 원네 내네 송바 송자 내네 게세기 전주 선반 남지 람라 롭되기 기부 되네지 된도 내네 그렇게 제바 인송 말이다.
So this completes the actual 37 verses, starting with the first verse on the difficulty of finding a precious human body and ending with the dedication. So it is this is how the text gained his name, the 37 verses, because it goes from this precious human birth until dedication. Then there's a few remaining verses. And the remaining verses also constitute the third major heading of the text, which is the conclusion of the composition. And the first verse here is, following the speech of the Sublime Ones on the meaning of the sutras, tantras, and their commentaries, I have written the 37 Bodhisattva practices for those who wish to train on the Bodhisattva's path. So this text constitutes the essence of the Buddha's words and the various commentaries written by the followers of the Buddha. And it was written for the sake of those who wish to train in the way that Bodhisattvas train. So this is the purpose of having written these 37 verses.
반대신이 짬유메 된지 로드메신 장바 중배치를 개발게 된대죠. 마치때 도단 담배 숭라 땜배치를 개설하는 주면레버 삼스타디 킹종으로 봐. 근데 코란 우주 토면상보 코란다고 임바이나 근데 로드 멤버 예스로 슝루기 돌아이네 로드 멤버이 제도기네 로드 멤버이 송 로드 미시드니 장바이네 배 첨부 면송되니 되네 개발된 속에 두 계약이 되는 측이 대절이네래 고림이네래 된소 직부지면 송래 매와 이네야 되네 도다 산재기 송ben도 진주 개발난 지송배 된제라 되네 예세란을 추매지 되네 네 예세란을 추매임바데 레버 삼구래 송스래.
And so then the next verse it deals with explains how this text was composed. Due to my inferior intellect and poor learning, this is not poetry that will please scholars. Yet as I have relied upon the sutras and the speech of the Sublime Ones, I think the Bodhisattva practices are not mistaken. So the author Ngulchu Thome Zangbom speaks of himself as someone with an inferior intellect and someone with poor learning, composition that will not please the scholars. However, these words still accord with the sutras and the speech of the Sublime One. So those the Buddha's words, and then also the commenters on the Buddha's words. And so for this reason, because these 37 verses accord with their word, these practices are not mistaken.
ini mucho thomas khran tabo lotre member khran tabo ge tini ting over cover ese indi samala tini o singa ching gewan roban ram tini sigde gel ma chaban dabo tinde gi nyebe cho yoba ina tini taban namji tini suba shiro che sungore taban namji sube o tini jibu taban namji tini kebadan tini o teta tamjege tini suba shiro che sungore sere taban namji suba zayadu sus.
And then the next verse is a confession. However, because it is difficult for one of inferior intellect like myself to fathom the depth of the great deeds of bodhisattvas, I beseech the Sublime Ones to forbear my errors, such as contradictions and incoherent reasoning. So then in the end, there's a confession. Even though the text is without mistake, since the deeds of the bodhisattvas are unfathomable, are so vast, and I, Ngulchu Thome Sangpo, am of inferior intellect, there might be some errors, such as contradictions and incoherent reasoning. And the author says, I beseech the Sublime Ones to forbear all of my errors with great patience.
단다야 ngōwa 레서 ngōwa 니도 간데 있는 ngōwa 직 채는 지금도 상상 공부 연구를 봐. 다 진짜 강기 ngō와 디 가르래서나 게세 랄레서도 마쇼로가 숨주 소딩 거라디 점바로 봐. 디 점에 개완디 승고 요사를 봐. 중오시기. 아 단다 디 가도 ngō와 디 bon에 제타 죽 바르게 얘네 디 개완디 승고 요사를 점에 개완디 데네 로와리 조심자 탐지 얘네 군소 전주 지습니다. 단도 된다 전주 지습니기 얘네 시단 시외 탈라 면내바 군소 전주 지습지 얘네 시발라 면내와 단다 된다 전주 지습지 시발라 면내와제 군소 전주 지습지 시외 탈라 면내베 얘네 라만다 야르메베 제레시부 제레시다 아니 총바지 용화쇼 송을 심제 탐지 다 대사래.
And then the last verse is a dedication. By the virtue arising from this, may all sentient beings become, through excellent, conventional, and ultimate bodhicitta, like the protector Chunresik, who does not abide in the extremes of existence or peace. So here we have another dedication. So we actually already had one before. It was the last verse of the 37 verses was dedication. And now this is also a dedication. So you may wonder, why is there two dedications? Wouldn't one dedication be enough? So it's because the first dedication we had, which is the last verse of the 37 verses, dedicates the virtue of all these practices. And then this one, this last verse, dedicates the virtue from having composed this text from beginning to the end, having completed the composition of this text. So that's why there's another dedication. So then for the meaning of that, so through it's a dedication that all sentient beings may develop the relative and the ultimate bodhicitta, so which does not abide in the extremes of existence or peace. So the relative bodhicitta is the one that does not abide in the extremes of peace and the ultimate bodhicitta does not abide within existence. And so through such bodhicitta, may all beings become like the protected Chenrezig, who is inseparable from the guru. So this completes the teachings, and I would like to thank Drupal and Anim and the translator and everyone else who joined the teachings, and see you next time. So let's see, then we have questions here. We have another 10 minutes left. I supplicate you, continue to turn the wheel of Dharma, and please continue our teachings for us on Saturdays. If not Saturdays, then when time permits. Da moon tune, kachuna ronangs. Sapempala.
Ruben Kongi and Zerim Dindoa, Zerim Dinde do any dishidia Mongbalangas Dutch or
Yeah, so La.
I at this part of some day or
Oh. So it could also be that that Drupal on Saturdays maybe has other programs, but we can definitely look into that in the future. And also I probably have to do some retreat at some point.
I had a question. Could I ask right now?
Yeah,
sure.
Okay. Tuchina Rinpoche, I had a question about contemplative practice in regards with the 37 practices. In the Kagyu lineage, there's a lot of emphasis on sadhana practice. So, for example, I'm imagining that Chenrezig practice would be very helpful to gain some realizations and some progress with 37 practices, but I actually don't have a lot of experience with contemplation practice. In fact, I don't actually see much of it at the centers, the practice of this. So I had a question about how to gauge one's progress in doing these contemplative meditations on the verses. If you could comment on contemplation practices in regards to the 37.
Da ngazo chitang Kagyu nangla ngazo tso da chokon nyamne mambosi ki yorwa bena dupta menda teni chokon nyamne chegi yori teni yina ngazo komshira gyage yo mare teni tanda ta gese lalen yake tangona chi khanla gore ta moran sena te Chenrezig nyamne sena pendo yores modina sam yore Chenrezig nyamne sena teni rangshi gi gese lana nyamdo tis yaken rogo yosare ina yang gom gyabala tene gese lala di nyamdo ti dia pelgona ti shira nyamnyo mes haisena ngranso chuzok jigung kagyo gi chuzok nala teni ngso gom shira gyagi yo mare teni dorduna gese lalen gomba ti yake doya tang gom gyaya teni nyamdo khanda yongo yore
Kita Mora Cheresi Dabochin Gom, then the Geselan Yamnichenan, then the Yaborova Harrison, Ninjigil Habel Hashodi, and a Cheresi Chandi or Ninjigi Ransu Double had Cheresi Chandi or and the Tigigani Cheresi and Lama Yermedo Bomb, Tigigani, then the Geselan so in the 공바 이나 되네 공바 쉐바 이나 되네 데 냠네 야부 칸데신이 용거를 했으나다 마시 가상칸이 슈사로와 되네 딘진디야 조 되니 딘지 지든 최계단 제비 보니 지 메발람제지 슈임바 딘수디 자진 공바시 투나 되네 니레 초나 간조 딘조 용거를 봐 데이터 벤저와 첨부 요령하는 셈 기부 중요한 막기 야간가 데이터 저와 첨부 차인데요. 와 지대 최근에 벤저와 첨부 요령. 디인디 섬한테는 녀라 묘바 남셰된 소체. 아니 곰. 대체 돈나 야부 요리. 사바심제 당보세 야부 딱. 근데 데제라 모란다고 있는 제레시다 곰게나. 아니 제레시 지울랑 곰. 아니 디인간이지 비지 뵙장 제한다고 된 소체. 녀라 아니 되게 간에 되네 단 진짜 공도 쉬어봤나시 몇발람제 된수 체니 곰투나 아니 림바신데 되네 칼레신데 되네 셈라데네 진주와테야 셈 기부요야 대 된대 용거를 봐 된다고래 저조다 강간나다 알아서 초가 찬이 적고 말해라 봐 알아서 냠내 제 마셔래만 초가 단데 냠내 치다 된다 강가 되나요 당 알아서 지 가사 소속이다 지 냠술래 마데 치다 된다 냠보 심 주토라 자는 로만로디 아소소라 라레데 요르바 대인데 사마데 도스치는 공바 셰토나 이네 야고 요레세 어디도 되지 송샤나
So you're practicing Chin Basic, and so it's actually an excellent way to practice the 37 Bodhisattva practices, because Chin Basic is the embodiment of compassion, and that's the essence of the 37 practices. And Chin Basic is inseparable from any other deity. And so now how do we combine this practice, and so it becomes like a meditative practice. So you have received the instructions that we have just mentioned, the 8 worldly concerns and how to overcome them, and so that we first must have an aspiration to practice this way, which is actually contemplative. We imagine, we reflect on this. So first you need reflection each and every day, and so then through habituation, actually you are able to transform your mind from an unhappy state to a happy state. And that's really much connected to the 8 worldly concerns, actually. So first, as you mentioned, you need to have an aspiration. And so how you can meditate is you can visualize yourself, or you can visualize Chin Basic above your crown, and then visualize how nectar flows down and purifies you. And then you just imagine you have an aspiration to practice according to the Bodhisattva practices. And then you habituate to that, and gradually, as you habituate, your mind will transform into a happy state of mind. And so in terms of Dharma centers, it's not that they just only do sadhana practice, but or kind of ritualistic practices, but these practices, these sadhanas, also have a deeper inner meaning, which is contemplative. And so whether or not this actually becomes contemplative, of course, depends on the practitioner, whether or not they're able to really take out the meaning of these words in the sadhana. But it can certainly become a contemplative practice.
yeah, that's why
Another
question.
There's a question here in the chat. What practices are good for countering depression? We see so much suffering in the world: war, mass shootings, earthquakes, disease, and natural disasters. How should we overcome the sadness from all this misery? Denisem gyowo lakare chegogdok. Dengsan gizambling 강한 mambo pena mangcho yore tini mi khonso menda gyag yore sayom yore natsa mambo yore tini 강한 mambo yore tini tela tini semba pe gyowo chagre tini tela kharche gore
세상 가르사나 나란서 다 잠불링 되나 망체지 동에다 중앙기직 중앙시기직 요한디 고다 고니스 대사 가가자 그러봐 내가 믹스에 독답세 시라세 자면도와 나란서 저 디마인베기지 막초 레 직대와지 탐진 레 딘데기 게임기 제니진 동네 마고지 용한테 또 쪼데 가서 알아서 되바디 전부 차송으로 와 요즘 촉신승에도 매바 뒤차송으로 와 때는 되바 전부 용도 참말라 때네 소소기지 사자이 개합이네레 때는 자제 지역이 삼로디 쑥 전부 용거 되바 전부 차데 와 때는 되바 전부 차운데 자제기 삼로디 쑥 전부 용 얘는 자제기 삼로디 쑥 전부 용도 삼말라 되게 기행기 전에 때는 말한서 죽지 용이야 막주 용이야 그러와 아니 딘데신이 되게 전에 때는 말한서 잠불링 되라더니 지 디지메바 망보지 용거도 내가 개합니 저버지 추바이네야 되게 신이 돼서 가서 간가 나가모단 자고 요 잠불링 간가 찍라 찍된 차도와 땐제데 쑥첨부 차인데요 그러와 찍라 야고 마숑나 되게 디 침제 개합들라 너야 니 침제 개합들라 답마데는 되게 기행기 전에 셴바 춘용 잠불링 춘용라더니 답마데야지 되게 용한테 타고 그 순위 차내로 대인도 삼아도 개 채셔진 그런 저 늦은 촉시했어야 개 제고야 돼 야마서 개 전부다 되게 잠바다 제와기 삼바데 용송하다 그러와 잠바다 제와기 삼바데 용송 있는 늦은 촉시에 매바진 되바 전부 차송데 이게 개인기 신에다 말한서 잠블링데라 돼서 셈지 간이 망보지 독사대 대톡되어다 나도 대톡되어다
So there's a lot of suffering in the world, and now when it comes to the harm caused by the elements, then that's kind of a different subject, because there's nothing much that we can actually do about that. But then when it comes to conflict situations like wars and shootings, conflicts between people, and then we need to understand that all this suffering comes from too much desire in our mind, much attachment, and a lack of contentment. For example, if it's between countries on a larger scale, then this desire manifests in the form of wanting to increase one's own space, one's own territory. And then that leads to war and conflict. And it's very different than in the old days and nowadays, because the world is so interconnected. What one country does has an effect on all the countries in the world. So it's not really a kind of isolated situation anymore, like it would have been in the old days. But nowadays, we are interconnected. If two countries are at war, it affects the whole world negatively. And so what's really most important is to understand that the reason for such conflict between people comes down to the mind. And there is not enough love and compassion in our minds, and there is too much desire and not enough contentment in our minds. And so that is really the root cause of all suffering in the world.
Oh yeah, that's it.
How do we combine the Mahayana practice of Tonglen with the pure vision of Vajrayana? Tekpa Chembuk Tonglen Nyamlen Titang Sanga Doje Tekpa Gitanang in Nyamlen Kanda Chegori.
다 동네 냠네 체세디 단다 람상 알아서 지 고미용데 섬 간된 공부를 세와 이나더니 마시 진지 슈 심바이르와 같이 마시 슈주 슈 차이 다 동네 냠네 세드 섬은 알아서 담보 매바치는 공부고요. 와 그러나 신 심지 지 동네에 나와 저 삼로 땅 공부시 이 동네에 나와 통용데 섬한테네 이 동네에 소소지 소소라 소 렘바라고 네 소소게 대화다 된저 바신 심전라 봐 때려봤다고 그러와 도시는 동다 렌세도 저도 된다데 데려봐 도시는 몇번치는 거는 좀 범고요 그러와 근데 고민데 람산 시행기 동네다 세로야세 자요 말이데 얘네야 되게 근데 고민데 삼아라 근데 간단지는 소소기 주지 전주심디 네 권의 공도 편로 그러와 근데 전주심배 땜부 차 그러와 동네세다 저라고 된대지래 얘네 대대지 공부시 되게 간에 얘네 신 동에 녀와 보대야 되네 다들 전에 니주면 바랑신게 맞죠 네수 렘바보 가서 소소야 얘네 랑신게 맞죠 딘데기 거네 되네 따고 그러라 공부 딘데 시고 딘데 시고 당나서야 되네 제가 당한조지 망치하다 악쇼 당나서야 돼 당나다 저와 연주 차한대요 차한대요 당나 제부터 제발 나야 되네 그래서는 당번이나 당나마게 당나디 마시뱅이나 얘네 가르에서는 답에 나왔을 때 삼만나 탐제배나지 나중에 시바이나 되네 지 지부 가사 근데 지 통바이네 되네 하이랑신 보면 더 보러봐 얘네 뇌지 지대 근데 지 통바이네 되네 배나 하이시야간 보면 더 보러 하이시야간 인삼네 되네 얘네 도시니 세민 장고고요. 그러와 시야간 근데 저 차제 탐제장 되네 나지랑신 그러와 이담게 하이 나지랑신 어디 메버시네 되네 곰고고요라다 근데 곰 용데 삼말라 되네 간자제네 마다베 나와디 슉충충충주고와 마다베 나와 슉충충주도 사나니 간자제네 다바람 좀 바시 마도 제라 마다베 나와스니 되네 용야고라 요 말이잖아 산제라 마다베 나와되네 네 그와 베테나시 뭐 당번이란다 도시 공부 시행 간자제네 되네 마다베 나와데다 장로도 선한테네 다과람 좀 바시로와 어느지 지대 통보이네 셔야 간자라시 주지 심제 통보이네 되네 이담까지 라시 되네 자자 탐제장 되네 어디네 이담 파이 nga지라시 아니 도시네 잘하지 연구요사리 아디 람상 갈래카고와 당번이라 말아서 몇번이네 당난 장고고요 양운데다 마다베 나와디 슉충충충 보고와 그래서는 녀몬보다 시제 집아마 삽라 마 잡르도 아니 답에 나와 샤야디 슉체르체르 누구 요사를 근데 ngachodan 저거 차네요
And so for the Tonglen practice, and so we have in a way gone through that how we can practice that in essence. So in brief, we need to have this aspiration that we mentioned before. First, we need to have an aspiration. We need to imagine the suffering of others, and then how we are taking on the suffering on ourselves, and how we are giving away our own happiness to sentient beings. Of course, we will not be able to immediately clear away all of the suffering of sentient beings, but it begins with an aspiration, and this aspiration then increases our bodhicitta. And when bodhicitta then increases and finally becomes stable, then we will begin to see that the suffering of others that we are taking on does not actually inherently exist. And then this is how Tonglen links into a pure view or into the secret mantra. So through stable bodhicitta, we recognize that the suffering of others and others themselves do not inherently exist. And then this is how then the practice of a pure perception begins. As a pure perception means that whoever you encounter, you see them as a Yidam deity, and every place you go, everywhere you are, your surroundings are seen as a pure land, or the boundless palace of the deity. And all sounds are heard as the mantra. As you habituate to a pure perception, impure perceptions will decrease. And finally, everything, the whole universe will be seen as an infinite field of purity. There will be no more impure perception. The universe is seen as a boundless palace, and all beings as the Yidam deities. All sounds are heard as the mantra. But that is, again, it's difficult to see it that way instantly. So we need to train the mind again, first starting with an aspiration of imagining that this is how things are. And in this way, gradually, our impure perceptions will get lesser or reduced. And as our impure perceptions diminish, the obscurations of the afflictive emotions and the subtle obscurations to omniscience will increasingly become reduced as well. So these thick layers of obscurations become thinner and thinner. And as they become thinner, our pure perceptions of the world will increase.
nga choka go gangala yorwa kharsana om soba washido sowa dama soba washido hang se sigorwa o ta tish ta moma de ta tene yungore toni gi sunam so lagu shawa jingo go yorwa ma to tagasa ngaranzo shata gi lui di lagu shawa gom de na tene di takta ji chendenji cha togo yongore toni do be sunam di hagu ngai sambe samba de tene ngela meba chini gom gorwa gom 용도 되니 간사진에 되니 난다 마다베 나와도 되니 슉충충 되니 다바람 좀 봐시 자야 돼 대용거 나 저거 골라간가 요르디 빼 내가 좀 버려서 와.
In the beginning of all like tantric sadhanas, rituals, there's this mantra, Svabhava Shuddha Sarvatama Svabhava Shuddho Hang, which is the mantra that purifies all into emptiness, which is a prerequisite for visualizing the deity. Because if we visualize the deity as possessing an ordinary body of flesh, blood, and bones, it will not become an authentic deity. So it is again an aspiration that we first develop. We habituate to the empty nature of phenomena. And as we habituate to that from the start, our impure perception will diminish and we perceive everything as an infinite field of purity. And so there is really a great significance to this. And that is why this mantra occurs in the beginning of all the sadhanas.
Rinpoche, I have one quick question, Ina, please, or two quick questions. My dog Rocky died. Do I ever going to see him again? And the second question, anger. I hold anger for weeks and days. It makes me very sick, and I don't know how to release it. It stops me from practicing. That's it. Pojiche. Thank you, Ina.
Devani dok tambo de mo chi de shesong. Deni ti yangya thugu reves. Deni nipa deni control aya de. Control ti lang cha to deni nima mambo tuntra mambo ko shiamen dok control dege dok semna dege dok. Deni di sempe nacha mambo zog dok. Deni nyamen parche chempo yongo yore. Deni kare chego resti control meba zogona.
당한저 키시니 겨와 랭게르세야 되다 거기 이르와야 코로라 코고 사말라더니 코라라랑게 되니 주 가송게 되니 제고 용거를 봐 인지 사마더니 겨와 유에다 고다 춘이르서 거기네 상nye 간데지라 계기유네다 코라라랑게 레다 치는 로고야지 봐 당가라서 콘도 되기 셈바마기바 제디 다데 뭐마라레다 인디 사마 딘징이 공도 쉬 심바이르와 당가라서 콘도 망제지 미기직 직 미년바 라용반다고 봐 너 듣는 미기지 nhập 제반다고 니 미기초 만배 제반다고 근데 제용된 간서 셈마기 바디 용거리 다디 용도 사마라 니 딘지 마시 쉬주 쉬산이라와 게 제주인데 마기 바 용도 사마라 니 가레서나더니 컨트롤랑이 미디카와 데 딱제체 네 컨트롤 사년 소소데 가와 데 딱제체라와 또 지금 이래도 제 공부시게 제다라와 아니 컨트롤된 쇼 총총총총 누구라와 소강서 점쟁 삼로 땅 마시는데 삼로 통도 땅에 되는 간서 셈디 막기 봐 연구요 컨트롤된 연구요 알아서 이내 알아서 라와요 말아 가르스나 왜 차단기 원도 슉 전부 태송디 어디 알아서 간가다 직발해와 이내야다 데레세 샤요 말아데 이는 고세 막기 봐데 기와서 연구도 삼아 근데 도시는 공부 시에도나 아니지 랑진지로 대쇼 총총총 줘야지 이네 대 줘봐 이나데네 신진지로 로데 슉처처 줘야지 고춘이를 봐 아니 대셔봐 이나데네 소소이네 셈바 기와시 연구래 어딘데 연구래 는 소소지 컨트롤 마사바 이나데네 소소기 막아서 미야 되는 semba기와 용구로 봐. 나 강가지기 찌라베 땡데요. 봐. 땡데 차네요. 봐. 도시 공부 시에도나 야고 요레스.
So about the first question, so since it was a dog, yeah, it will definitely take birth again. But wherever it takes birth depends on the dog's karma. So a certain cause leads to a certain corresponding results. But one thing is for certain, it will take birth again. It will follow its own karma. But wherever that is depends on the karma created. And then regarding the second question, the anger, so that's something we just discussed actually. That's precisely what makes us so unhappy and miserable. It's our anger and us holding on to our anger. And mostly we get angry about things that other people do to us. So somebody insults us, criticizes us, somebody looks down on us, and so on. We get angry. When we get angry, so as you mentioned before, you should analyze the anger. Does it really exist? Where is the anger? And what about the person who is getting angry, myself? Where am I? And as you keep meditating in this way, the anger will get lesser and lesser. So mainly we hold on to anger because we don't know how to reflect properly. We just think in the short term about what happened and we're just angry because we have no mental freedom. And we all are controlled by our thoughts of attachment and aversion, anger, and so on. And this is what causes us to be so miserable or unhappy. So as we also mentioned, as you keep habituating to that meditation, the wish for your own happiness diminishes. And as that diminishes, the wish for others' happiness increases. That's just the nature of things. They are like inversely related in that way. So then when you are able to let go of your anger and be happy, then also that will have an effect on the person who made you angry in the first place. And because everything is interdependent. So try to reflect in this way.
Thank you, I will.
Thank you. 선음대 탐제세반이 돈나님 변전아 탐제대 제가 나지 바로 조금 시베 솔레로 좀 전조 심조를 보지 뭐제 번음 지지 제와냐바 메바야 보내고
Thank you so much for everything.
뭐야
Tutushi Rinpoche, please come teach us again. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Rinpoche.
Kachan Roland.
야야
Thank you.
세리
Sharing, Bashidele.
신들레 참마가 도돈 도스냐면 공부시로지 니리니리 좋아나나 뭐다디 레와이
And Rinpoche says, I hope that all of you will continue to practice in the ways that we just mentioned as much as you can each and every day.
모타 난로네 렐리 난로네 남로 난로고 얘네 로바 가와 간대진 로바 얘네 양아랑서 진 야고 진 독자 라만다 체그리 다 디가바 딘지 공도 쉬반나시 얘네 공부 시에도나 근데 곰차는 곰스도 인지 민지 쪽서 된 거야 요 말이 잡고는 지 거야 요 말에서 도 공부 시로지 뭐다 도지지
So wherever you are, if you're if you're going in your car or in an airplane or in a train, wherever we go, we always encounter some difficulties. So whenever we encounter difficulties, that is when you have to meditate. So meditation does not only mean to sit in a meditative posture or to sit in a cave and meditate, but it really means to practice with whatever difficulties you encounter. So now we can dedicate.
Okay, we'll do the Jigten Sungwon prayer.
뭐야
Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind, root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yadams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana, and the innate root of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratikya Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras, and the hordes of demons experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind be moistened. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of mind as such, and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I in any case gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo.
Oh, yeah.
Tushishe, Rinpoche.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ina.
Thank you, Ina.
Thank you.
Ina.
Thanks, everyone.
Sangha.
Till next time.